Good. Yeah, a very warm welcome to one of the last sessions of this year's symposium. My name is Dominic. I'm from the Criminological Research Institute of Lower Saxony, and I'm very happy today to chair our session titled Selected Studies in Criminology. And as it sometimes is with sessions scheduled at the very end of the symposium or at the conference, it is tricky to find a connection between the papers that will be presented here. So I won't spend too much time to find a connection between Monica Smith's talk about the possible impact of the migration crisis in Europe and neighborhood crime, and the second presentation from Eva Groß about hate crime victimization in Germany, and Merle's talk about gender-based violence in Europe. We have agreed that we're going to give our presentations first and take and answer questions afterwards in this group.
Hello, and thanks for coming to this last session, so that at least we have a few listeners, so that's really nice. And I'm Eva Groß from the section Criminological Research and Statistics of the State Office of Criminal Investigation in Lower Saxony in Germany. And I'm going to talk about hate crime victimization and a first systematic attempt of a measurement in a victim survey in Germany. And I do this together with my colleague Arne Dreißigacker, who is from the Criminological Research Institute of Lower Saxony, and unfortunately he couldn't attend today, but he's doing the analysis with me together for the other federal state. Well, what I'm going to do is quickly introduce you to the concept, what are we talking about, and tell you a bit about the background information about the study. Then I go to the method results and try to highlight some points which I think we need to discuss on this topic. So first, the concept and the background. Hate crime or bias-motivated crime. We decided to choose a rather general definition of those sort of crimes from Levin and McDevitt. It's hate crimes are criminal offenses motivated either entirely or in part by the fact that by the fact or the perception that a victim is different from a perpetrator. So this rather general definition of hate crime has the advantage that it implicates three aspects that we think are pretty important when we talk about hate crime. The first aspect is that hate crimes don't involve actions, that they only involve actions, most of the time actions that have already been defined as illegal by the state or federal statutes or law. So this doesn't define any additional behavior as being criminal, it just changes the quality of already criminal defined behavior. The second point is that the definition specifies on the motivation of the perpetrator. So, and it specifies the motivation for committing such crimes as requiring either a racial, religious, ethnic, or some other identified difference between the victim and the offender that must play at least some sort of a role in the motivation of committing that crime. And also what Levin and McDevitt highlight, and that's why we like their definition, is that this definition is not close to specific groups that are named here. So any group that may be relevant in combination with societal developments, for example, asylum seekers, may be added to this crime or to the focus of hate crime victimization, depending on which groups are in the focus of hate. So, for example, in Germany, we had a labor market reform in 2007, and we realized that parallel to this reform, there was a big rise in devaluations of unemployed persons, for example. So depending on societal developments, groups can be added or taken away. So this is open, this category system. Moreover, Levin and McDevitt highlight that those crimes motivated by bigotry or prejudices usually arise not out of some extreme groups or pathological rantings and ravings of few deviant types or hate groups, but they rise out of the very mainstream society. This is what we know from prejudice research as well. So there might come a new group into the society that might threaten the status of an established group. There might be competition about scarce resources, or the intergroup relations might change, and this might give rise to high-end hate crimes, also coming from the general population, not from the hate communities. So these mechanisms seem to be at work in Germany. Actually, these are official police statistics for the state of Lower Saxony, but we have a similar pattern for overall Germany. This is the so-called politically motivated crime in Germany. That's officially comes as close as possible to hate crime as we can, but it's not capturing what hate crime means. Nonetheless, we don't have any better data. So we see here, we have this divided into politically right-motivated, left-motivated, so to say, crimes committed by non-German citizens and other not to be classified. And you see these brighter blue bars, and you see this really steep rise in all sorts of politically motivated crimes from 2014 to 2015. And then it goes back down again, but not to the level it was before 2015. And this is the point when the security agencies also got interested in this phenomenon of hate crime or politically motivated crime, because everywhere we have this steep increase in Germany anyway. And this increase goes parallel with a high influx of refugees coming from the Middle East and North Africa. And so this might be a point that these mechanisms that Levin and McDavid are pinpointing might be at work in Germany. So we have group competition threat, especially from low status groups, competition about scarce resources, and so on. So our problem now is that we don't know a lot about this phenomenon at all. We don't have a nationwide victim survey in Germany yet, and there is we need to know more. So these statistics don't tell us anything about how police treats these people, how they suffer from the crime experienced, and the like. So we don't have a nationwide victim survey in Germany periodically that would capture this phenomenon. We made a start with a nationwide periodically victim survey in 2 northern German federal states. That's Lower Saxony, where I come from, and Schleswig-Holstein, which we closely cooperate together. So this we started in 2013. That was the principal was the Ministry of Interior, and we as police were the people who conducted this survey then, and it was meant to supplement the official police statistics like every victim survey, you know, highlighting the dark figures of crime. So now we decided this year, since we need to know more about this phenomenon of hate crime, we include an additional module on hate crime in this periodically survey. So now we have data, this is Lower Saxony, and we have data in Schleswig-Holstein, the other northern German federal state. The problem is that I cannot present the results from Schleswig-Holstein today because the ministry didn't release the report yet, so we are not allowed to. So I can only present you the data from Lower Saxony, and we will have a problem with low ends, but I'll show you later. And at some stage we can throw these data sets together. And actually in Germany, in the future, we are trying to get a nationwide periodic victim survey so we can have better data. But this is the first try to have representative data on hate crime victimization in Germany. And I will present you the results now. Now the method, what did we do? It's pretty usual for those victim surveys. This where we included hate crime is the third wave of a biennial, like every 2 years, questionnaire. We started in 2013. It's a postal survey of the population of Lower Saxony, aged 16 or older. We have a random sample from the Register of Official Inhabitants. We contacted 40,000 people in Lower Saxony and have a really good response rate of 45%. And we have a sample this year of 18,000 roughly, and we had even higher response rates in the 2 first waves. So this is pretty cool. The content is experience with victimization, sure, willingness to report victimization, so we can calculate report rates, neighborhood quality, fear of crime, means to protect oneself against victimization, perception of police and police work, and the so-called demography, standard demography, and the module 5, which we included in terms of hate crime this time. We developed this questionnaire kind of along the lines of the National Crime and Victimization Survey in the United States, but we realized really fast that we cannot take it one-to-one to Germany and Lower Saxony, so we had to change it quite a bit. So the comparability with other nations, I'll get to that later, is really hard, and we had to change so many questions that it's hard to compare. But yeah, and we did a cognitive pre-testing for our hate crime module, and I will present you the results now. Results. First of all, prevalence rates and police reporting rates and perceived motives, like what groups are most victimized by such crimes in Germany. This, you don't have to read this is in German, just that you have an impression what our survey looks like. Here we have the question, we have filter questions, only getting victims, and then we have the question, do you think that the motivation for your victimization was because you have certain characteristics that are in combination with the group you belong to? And then we have, for example, age, your origin, color of skin, religion, the like. And we said, okay, this listing is not final, so there could be anything else. But yeah, and then we said, okay, what sort of a crime was it? And you could say, this happened, yes, no. If yes, how often? And did you report to the police? The standard questions for those. So this is a coordinate system. We have the prevalence rates on the x-axis and the police reporting rates on the y-axis. And this is just that you have an impression what sort of crimes are how distributed. We have a very high, relative high prevalence rate of theft. And this is different from the American results, for example. They have very high rates of violent offenses, assault, and we have this very high rate of theft. And here you can see theft is, for example, has a high prevalence and a high police reporting, and insult on the internet has in this graph a really low prevalence and low police reporting. And then we have pretty common things like personal insult or defamation with a really low police reporting rate. And we have rather low prevalence crimes like assault in Germany, at least in our survey, unlike in the United States, with high reporting rates. Basically, the overall prevalence rate, the overall reporting rate is comparable to the common usual crime. It's not so different. We have an overall reporting rate of 26% in Lower Saxony, and for common crimes without a hate motive, we have 29%. So this is really not so different. Also, the variation in reporting, depending on the sort of crime, is also comparable to non-hate motivated crimes. This is a bit of a different graphic, also showing the sort of crimes, and this is an incidence rate graphic. So here we see that theft, which was so high in the prevalence rate, in the usual prevalence rate, when you take the incidence, it's like how often did this happen in relation to all incidents happening in hate crime, we see that theft is like not so common anymore. So we have more than 70% of those insult, threat, defamation crimes also with the internet. So the internet gets more prevalent if you take the incidence rates than only the prevalence rate. So it's not so easy, the picture. It depends how you show it. Okay. The motives. Yeah, this is how we asked for the motives, and we say, please think about the crime that you want to tell us more about now. So this is our filter. And then tell us, why do you think you became a victim? And then we have all the motives, like my origin, religion, color of skin, political opinion, disability, social status, financial situation, age, my looks, my profession, gender identity, and the like. And here we have the results. We have the blue bars. That's not divided by with migration background, without. That's a general population. And here we have a real clear picture that the highest, the most common motive in Germany is social status, financial situation, gender identity, and not so much color of skin, origin, political views. Those are rather low. And also when we take all motives together, we have no significant difference between persons with and without migration backgrounds. But here, you can see, if we look at the specific motives, we see that persons with migration background have very much higher rates in those motives. Like, they report much more often they were victimized because of the color of their skin, religion, origin, which is not so surprising. So I guess we have the native population more in those motives, and the persons with migration background rather report those motives. We have a question about non-involved third persons, like have you seen someone who watched the scenery and how did they react? That's what we asked, and we know from research that that the responses by third persons are really important for the hate crime victims, because then they have either the feeling, okay, the perpetrator is acting on behalf of the whole society and the group, or if some people try to stand for the victim, they say, okay, not everyone thinks like these people. So they feel more disintegrated in everything. That's pretty logic if no one helps, if they are bystanders. And we wanted to see how the situation is in Germany. This is again how we asked that. Have there been third persons? Yes, no, I don't know. And then we asked, what did they do? Yes, no, I don't know. And this is the result of those people who could answer the question. And from those who could answer the question and saw and reported from a third person, we have the blue bars, which are kind of positive, like about 25%, 23% reported from the people went for help, supported me. This is more than half of the people who reported that. They supported me with words, physically, or supported me in another way. This is pretty nice. But on the other side, we also have the red bars, and we have really 43.3% of persons who were there as third persons and just looked away. And we also have those kind of, I didn't expect that, almost 15% of bystanders who joined the offender interrogating the victim, so according to the reports of the victims. So this is quite worrying. I think it doesn't really tell us high civil courage in German society or something. Well, we have to talk about this, so. Victims' perception of bias in hate crime victimization. So we asked the typical questions, like we tried to find characteristics of the crime that would give us some security to sort that, like qualify that as a hate crime. For example, the offender insulted the group I feel I belong to. There were symbols of hate. The incidents happened at a place related to certain groups. The crime happened in a context of an event typically associated with a group I feel I belong to, and these sort of stuffs. So here we have the different colors, the different motives. We had to classify the motives because we had the small n problem. So we did factor analysis and classified the motives according to which ones belong together empirically. And we see the most qualifying as a hate crime are not those motives that are most prevalent in Germany. So the most qualifying as a hate crime, like, are rather the motive of color of skin, political views, sexual orientation. So those are the motives because that were driving the offender, according to the reports of the victims. which most represent hate crime if you take the literature, like what we asked. And so these are those groups that are less prevalent. So we have, so maybe the social status question, maybe this doesn't really qualify so much as a hate crime. So maybe we have to discuss about that as well. And results, fear of crime and strain as a result of hate crime victimization. We also asked the questions on fear of crime. Again, McDavid, interviews with victims of hate violence indicate that the aftermath of their victimization is characterized by a very pervasive feeling of fear. And this is pretty logic if we have the nature of those crimes in mind, because the victims, they generally cannot do anything to prevent themselves from getting victimized. For example, if you are victimized because of the color of your skin, you cannot just change the color of your skin. And it's not so much that they are fearful again, from a specific perpetrator, but they rather have the feeling that it's an arbitrary victimization. They cannot protect themselves. So in the theory, this is why it rises their fear of crime so much. So we have the numbers here, and they really, really underline this hypothesis about hate crime victimization. So we have non-victims, that's the light blue bar. We have 3 forms of fear of crime. We have cognitive fear of crime, affective fear of crime, and spatial feeling of insecurity. And then we have behavioral components of avoiding certain places. So they also belong to the fear of crime complex. And we see the red bars, and this is pretty straightforward. I mean, these differences are all significant, and we just see non-victims are less fearful, and then we have victims without a hate motive, and then we have the hate crime victims, and they just have straightforward the highest fear of crime. Then strain caused by the victimization. Here we see the blue bar is victims without hate characteristic, and we have the red bars. These are the victims, the hate crime victims. We asked for emotional strain caused as a consequence of the victimization, financial strain and physical strain caused by the crime. And we see really big, significant differences, especially for the emotional strain as a consequence of the victimization. So hate victims suffer significantly more from emotional stress as a consequence of the victimization. Same for physical stress, not so much for financial stress. So this doesn't seem to be such a big factor. Strain caused, again, the same strain dimensions, emotional, financial, and physical, split for the different motive groups that I showed before. And here we see that the people who report they were victimized because of their disabilities or chronic illness or sexual orientation are most strained emotionally after the crime happened, and also physically they report the most strain, and also the financial stress. But the financial stress is also people who say, because of my occupation I was stressed. And also we have color of skin, religion or origin. They are third highest in physical stress. So this is roughly it. So the most emotional stress is for the chronic illness and sexual orientation. Okay. This is again strain, stress to be re-victimized, and we have again the group color of skin, religion, origin, which is rather low in prevalence, but we see they have the highest characteristics of being a hate crime. They are most strained, as well age, appearance, sex, and political views. I have to. And real quick, attitudes towards police and reactions of police. In order to reduce this high fear of the hate crime victims, it's important to offer them some form of protection from future violence. And the police plays an essential role in responding to hate crime. They represent the only group that can legally promise to protect the victim from any future attack. So according to McDavid and Levin, police has a really important role in that whole scenery. So we look what attitudes towards police have hate crime victims in comparison to non-hate crime victims. And here it's again straightforward, significant differences. We have non-victims, victims without hate crime and hate crime victims, and all people are treated just by the police. Disagreement, this is disagreement, and we have on all dimensions, we asked for the trust in police as an organization representing the state of law, the lowest trust among hate crime victims significantly. This is the same effect. It's the attitudes towards police after having contacted the police, and we have non-victims and hate crime victims without hate crime and hate crime victims. Non-victims doesn't make sense because they wouldn't contact the police. And also here we see this effect that the hate crime victims on most of the dimension, they have significantly worse attitudes. And this is again from the group, and here we see, I highlighted that the worst attitudes towards police after contact is again the group political views, color of skin, religion, origin, the red and the purple bar. So the low prevalence motives seem to be the worst in their effects. Okay. We have the highest prevalence, social status, financial situation, and the like, and this is different from the Swedish crime survey. They also have a hate crime module, and they have the highest prevalence from xenophobic attacks, but this is like official statistics, so it's not so good to compare. And also the United States. On the other side, they didn't ask for social status and financial situation, so this might be the reason why the color of skin and ethnic background is much more important. We have for the victimization based on origin, religion, color of skin, the most biased perception, the highest fear of crime, most negatively perceived reactions by police, and even though it is less prevalent in Germany, I told that in between already. The police reporting rates are similar to those of conventional crime, same variation. And then we have the problem of the high fear of crime after hate crime victimization. We saw that in the data. And the chances to deal with this, how can we deal with this? And we have the problem in Germany that over 40% of the people who were watching the scenery looked away. And 15% even joined the offender interrogating the victim. And we have comparably low trust in police among those hate crime victims. So how do we reduce the fear of crime? I mean, this is a specific victimization. So. And we have especially strong emotional physical strain caused by victimization. This is what I showed you. And the discussion is, I was wondering, why do we have such high prevalence rates for social status and financial situation other than in the US and Sweden? Well, sure, they didn't ask for it, but what would happen if they would ask for it? And what does that do with our sample of hate crime victims? The second discussion point, the proportion of assault among hate crime victims is much lower in Germany than in America. In America, we have over 60% violent offenses among the hate crime victims. In Germany, this is only 12%. And in Sweden, according to the official crime statistic, it's 13% of violent crimes. Then we don't know what are violent crimes. Are they only assault or what's included? So. Possibly these 2 points belong together. I was thinking that's what I'm kind of try to get to, because maybe we get a completely different sample since we are asking for social status, financial situation, age, and the like, so that we get more of the native or German population in the sample and less of those groups that are traditionally victims of hate crime. So maybe there's a difference in the violent victimization between those groups. That's why our samples are so not comparable. And this brings me to the last point. After getting a bit into this topic, I really have the problem, how should we ever compare between countries those rates? I mean, we have the problem in the official recording system of the police, even within Germany, there's different ways of doing it when you are there as a police officer. What do you count as a right-wing crime and whatnot. And if it goes to different countries, it's a completely different system. Same with the victim surveys, I guess, but there we have a bigger chance to similarize the questions maybe. But so we tried to do it like the United States, it just didn't work. And so this is something I would like to discuss, what you think about it. And yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon from my side as well. My name is Merle Paats and I am representing here Eurostat. And Eurostat is European Union Statistical Office, not collecting data by itself, but coordinating the data collection with member states within so-called ESS system. This is European Statistical System, where the data collection is done quite harmonized way, following to European Union needs, and also to having some certain level of quality. I talk today why and how we started to develop a gender-based violence survey. And unfortunately, I don't have so many. Okay, I will use the computer, don't worry. So unfortunately, I cannot show you today data at all because we are still in developing process, which is pity because I am statistician and I really love all those graphs that we just saw. But okay, now it's working. Thank you. So why we need this kind of data? And the first, maybe most developed international agreement is so-called Istanbul Convention, which is a European Council Convention to combat the violence against women and domestic violence, adopted in 2011, signed by all member states, unfortunately not ratified yet by all of them, but still more than half of member states already ratified this convention as well. And Article 11 from that convention is exactly focusing on data collection, including also population-based surveys. Another thing is that the European Commission itself has a quite a strong policy to capture and combating gender-based violence, including the legislation, including also data collection and research. And of course, Eurostat has received repeated calls of Council and European Parliament to collect data on gender-based violence. So based all of that, 2016, it was decided to develop a new gender-based violence survey within European statistical system, will be done, coordinated by Eurostat. How you start with the new survey? Usually you start from the literature review. In our case, of course, we also had to look at the existing experiences already at national level as well as international level. You need to look at the indicators with what you could measure this topic. And that one will give you also the scope of the survey. You need to develop the questionnaire and the methodology. Not all European Union surveys has harmonized questionnaire. Might be that it's only description of variables which are agreed and harmonized. But for this survey, it's clear that you need one sample questionnaire, however, which must be adapted at national level, with translating the questions and also checking and pre-testing how the questions are working in national language. And then, of course, you need to test it before you go with all member states. And to do all of that, as I said, Eurostat is not working alone. It's working in cooperation with member states. We have a support through grant from Italian Statistical Office, ISTAT. And we have the task force, which is having not all member states, but member states who showed their interest to participate in that process, and also academic background, and also European Union institutions as Gender Equality Institute, also THU09 and FRA. And representatives from other DGs from European Commission as well. When we did this background study, we started, of course, from literature review, but for us, the most important was to see which are the experiences at national and international level. We looked at the international surveys, and we also looked national surveys. We reviewed indicators which are already agreed at international level. We looked UN indicators and UN other guidelines. Also the indicators coming from Beijing Platform for Action, Sustainable Development Goal indicators, UNEC gender equality indicators, and finally indicators developed by EIGE to measure gender equality in the EU. What we have at national level in place. So the picture is quite good. We can say that out of 28 member states, majority of them have national survey or module collecting some data on gender-based violence, domestic violence, intimate partner abuse, or something similar on that topic. However, we have few countries who doesn't have actually national experience. But even in those countries, they have used few questions in health survey or in some other relevant surveys, or they have done this kind of survey taking into account only one region in the country, not all country per se. So if you look at the national surveys more deeply, then dedicated national survey on that topic is in place in majority of member states. Some of them have only the module, but if you look a bit about regular data collection, it's not anymore so nice because quite a few member states have repeated the survey and even less have data collection every year. So this is like summary about last 10-15 years. Anyway, we see that the picture is not so bad, so we could have the data on gender-based violence if you just take into account the national experiences and what is collected at national level. As soon as you go a bit deeper, you see that there is a huge variation between member states. So the target populations are totally different. Half of member states included in the surveys only women, while another half tried to collect the data about women and men both. There are some age limits, just starting from different age groups or ending in different age groups or taking into account only middle age or working age or whatever. Some countries have included also specific groups in that survey, like disabled people, migrant background. Then if you look a bit about the topics included in the survey, you see that some surveys are taking into account only some part of gender-based violence, only intimate partner, for example, or only some types of violence, for example, focusing only on sexual violence. If you look at the questions, then you can also see a huge variation. There are countries who have just a few questions, while you have also countries who have very detailed screening questions with different acts. Data collection modes are different. Data are collected with self-completed interviews, with face-to-face interviews, using computers, using paper, online, post-interviews, and so on. And the last point, what is also quite important for us, less than half of member states have included in this kind of national surveys, national statistical institutes, which means that national statistical offices, they don't have just experiences with collecting this kind of data. So anyway, still you could find few indicators that you could be able to calculate based on national surveys. Why not? Why we need this kind of EU survey? Because we have this survey, what is equal with this apple, more or less in all countries. But this is exactly that some of the surveys are focusing only one part of the gender-based violence or some types. One survey is taking into account total population, other survey only women or some age groups. And as I said, we look at the picture about 10-15 years, and unfortunately, while some surveys has been done like 10 years ago and not repeated, they are quite old. So if you put all that together, you unfortunately don't get one healthy apple. I agree that when you are making the EU-wide survey, and even if you have the same methodology and you have the same questionnaire, it's still containing different apples, not the same one apple. That's true. And we are totally sure that comparison between countries will be very challenging because countries are very different with different cultural background, with different level of experiences, also different level of acceptance of violence by general population, and all of that will definitely impact the results. But if we compare, we can look why the results are different, and we could try to explain it. And definitely we will have figures at EU level, with some limitations, but still. So, what we have done until now, we have discussed with the member states scope and main indicators. It is agreed to test to include total population 18 plus in that survey. It will be tested with the pilot survey, is it possible or not, and I will explain a bit why we have some doubts here. It will cover the non-partner physical sexual violence, and partner violence we include as well psychological violence, sexual harassment at work, stalking, physical and sexual violence experienced in childhood. And the reference period will be lifetime, while there are countries who doesn't have this kind of data. And for the monitoring, we ask also the experience during the last year and during the last 5 years. The questionnaire is quite long, as you see, but it's colored because actually, even if the questionnaire is 70 or 80 pages long, it doesn't mean that the interview will last 1, 2, 3 hours. Based on the experiences in other countries, it's in average half of an hour because quite many people don't have any experience, and this is why they skip out from this section very quickly, and you don't continue with this section. The questionnaire was pre-tested, the first draft questionnaire was pre-tested last year. It was done in 8 countries, which means that it was translated also in 8 languages already. Different methods were used by countries like expert review, focus groups, cognitive testing, and also test respondent interviewing method because Netherlands added this questionnaire to their national survey. Before they were asking from the people, are you agreed to participate in the pilot? They took the sample from those who responded yes. They sent the questionnaire out to 200 people. And after one reminder, they received back 129 questionnaires, which was clearly too much to make a cognitive analysis. So they selected only 20 with most field comments, and they did this. But it was very good sign for us because it was really like almost like tested that field already. And the main conclusion out of the pre-testing process was that questions were considered very sensitive, but still possible to respond. And the respondent burden was still the main concern. So after the pre-test, our main purpose was to cut the questionnaire. While I hope here are many researchers, do you know what is the answer? Did we manage to cut the questions? No, of course. We added them. We changed the wording in the questions. We also changed still the amount questions. Some were excluded, some were added, and some we had to split because several issues were taken into account in one question. And even if we were thinking that if one is yes, then it means yes, it was not true. The main discussion what we had, however, was how to capture gender-based and how to compare experiences of women and men. Because Istanbul Convention itself is focusing only on women, but countries are interested to get both women and men in that survey. And why this is so complicated? Because we need to take into account at first 28 or even more countries, because EFTA countries is also in ESS system. We need to cover the lifetime. We need to think about experiences at country level with making this kind of surveys, but also how ready people are talking about their experiences. And we need to take into account respondent burden. But we all know that if we ask those questions from women and men, then specifically for the physical violence and partner violence, we might have the perpetrators who are saying yes because they are perpetrators and not victim. But there is one moment usually in every this kind of violent experiences when the victim will start defending her or himself. And this is why the perpetrator can easily say, yes, I have experienced that as well. And this is exactly the thing which makes it very complicated to figure out this experience was because you are victim or you are perpetrator. So this is the reason why many researchers have pointed out that if you really want to capture gender-based, you need to focus on repeated violence, frequency of violence, seriousness, and also consequences of violence. So the first way is to focus on victim, which is used usually in violence against women surveys, and for that it's fine. And another way is to focus on episode. So to make it more clear that as soon as you have the screening questions, did you experience this or that? Then for this victim perspective, you should focus really on type of violence. Any person except your partner, your current partner, your former partner. And after that, you have two possibilities. One possibility is really to focus on episode. Please remember the last episode and then to ask what happened then. Please remember now episode before, what happened during that. Or, as it is usually done, try to collect this kind of information more aggregated level, like at the type of violence level, thinking now about physical, what you experienced it, or at perpetrator level, thinking now what the relative did to you, and so on. So you collect this more or less same information, but just on aggregated level. And of course, both ways have the limitations. If you focus on episodes, you cannot collect the information about all of them, and you miss quite a lot of information. And if you focus on victim, then definitely you miss some information because you collect already aggregated level information. So the questionnaire with what we went to the pilot survey is a bit like a compromise between them. So taking into account the fact that we have so different countries, we still focus on type of violence. Non-partner violence, who did it? Partner violence by psychological, physical threats and sexual violence. And then we go on the aggregation level of perpetrator. This perpetrator did it once or more, how serious it was, how often it happened, did it cause any injury, did you felt your life was in danger, and so on. And then after that, we ask about last episode, in-depth questions about non-partner, current partner, and former partner violence. Still, we see already now, in this way, we have still some limitations. Yes, we can focus more. We can cover the lifetime as it was planned. We can cover the 1 year and 5 years as well. Maybe there is no need to remember every single episode, but it's still collected at aggregation level, and we have less information at every single episode. That's clear. And we already noticed that it's quite complicated if the person experienced by the same type of perpetrator, but by different persons. For example, uncle and brother, and both are male relatives. So, way forward. Now, the questionnaire is finished for the pilot survey, and it's for the testing at national level. It will going on this year. It will be ended next year, and then we will have the final reports from the countries. It will be done in 13 member states and Iceland. So we have the final questionnaire and guidelines in 2019, and we hope to be implemented the survey to the 2020-2021. It will be voluntary, which means that we really need to push the countries to take part of this project, but we offer the financing. Thank you very much. Just for your information that all documents which have been discussed and prepared are publicly available in Circa BC, which is the main place where the documents are shared by the European Commission.
Thank you. Yeah, the very last presentation, at least scheduled at the very end of the conference. I'm going to present some results about a campus survey that we have conducted a while ago in a German city. And before I present you the results, let me give you some insights into the background of the study. Since, I would say, 3 years around about that, we could see an increase in Germany in media reports dealing with security in public organizations. I brought some headlines here. And one of those particular incidents was that a professor complained when he presented his results and related with that the political implication of his results, that he was, that he became a victim of cyber harassment, not only cyber harassment, but also harassment directly in the streets. The background was he did research on climate change, and his opinion was that the climate change that we see is not only man-made, and you all may have heard in your countries similar discussions, and you know how emotional the debate has become. And that started a debate in Germany how to deal with that, what to do if the academic discussion becomes too rude. And after that incident, lots of other professors showed up and complained that they have similar problems, especially people who are doing, for example, research with animals. So that was a little bit the background, and that raised the idea to conduct a survey on a university. I mean, at the first place, this is internationally very well researched. There's a wide body of research. I brought some studies based on other studies, reviews, that violence in universities is very well researched, but it's always focused on the situation of students, or very often, sometimes at professors, but usually it's about students. And it's pretty interesting to see that the prevalences of victimizations, that they are pretty different. I brought one example here that's about the offender perspective, that Strawson find that it varied between 17% and 45%. Of course, that depends very much on the way how you ask the question, but it's a pretty heterogeneous situation, what you see in the previous literature. Also in Germany, the topic harassment and violence in the context of the university is examined. I brought 3 studies here. I would say that the most important one is the one from Kerner and colleagues conducted at the Eberhard Karls University in Tübingen. It's a very methodological, well-approached study. It's not a convenient survey. They had a very good sample. They had good numbers. As you can see, they could reach over 4,000 people. And they also covered a small group in their sample with professors and research associates. So their study is not limited to students, but it's also focused on that. And all of those studies, and they are well and they are interesting, but again, they are focused on the situation of students. So the idea was to do that a little bit different and to not to focus on a special group and to accept the university or to see the university as the space of living and the working space of students, but also of people who are working in technical and administration, so people who are working in the library or the facility manager who's working in the university. And we used that opportunity. There was a little bit of money available to do that, and fortunately every member of the university, no matter what position, has an email account, which is pretty normal, and needs that email account for work. So it was easy to reach the complete all the members of the university with their email account provided from the university. So we designed a with Lime survey, an online survey, and send out links via that official mail address. And of course, if you go into the field, as we have heard from Merle, you are interested in several things. So of course, it was a multi-thematic questionnaire with very many topics. And the wording of the questions, we have heard about issues of translation in social science in this panel already. The wording, we orientated our wording on previous study to make it possible to compare our results. And we orientated ourselves very much at Kerne because it was the most or the best developed study. Here you can see our response rate. We could reach 4,881 people. And that's an overall response rate from around 22%, which is not that good, I know that. But if you have a look at the response rate independency of the status of the people who have participated in the study, you will find that we could reach 74.5% of the employees of technology and administrative staff. Researchers, research associates were also participated also very good with 71.3%, and the professors as well. And the lowest response rate came from the students with around 17.6%. Of course, they might have other things to do than participating in such a boring victimization survey in their free time. Anyway, this might be a first indication what's to come. Maybe that group has things to report. And while you get very different results by very different wording of questions and by very different definitions of victimization, I brought you here to make that as transparent as possible, the wording that we used. Because in one study conducted in Germany, it was defined as being a victim of a sexual crime when you answered the question, did anybody in the last 12 months looked after you? And made some indication that he were interested in you. So people who indicated, yes, that has happened to me, were defined as a victim, which of course brought the victimization prevalence in that study up to the sky. So we had a filter when people indicate, did that ever happen in the context of your work, of your study in the university? People were also asked, did that happen within the last 12 months? So we could separate the lifetime prevalence from the 12-month prevalence. And here you see again our questions. And what I brought together in this slide is the lifetime prevalence of at least one offense that we have seen in the previous slides. And what you see straight away is that more than the half of the employees of technology and administration report at least one incident, and the professors also more than the half. Well, professors and people who are working at the administration of the university usually work longer there than students. Students come there, do their study, and then usually they leave the university. So one has to be careful with the lifetime prevalence, with the interpretation. But nevertheless, if you go on prevention, And if you have a look at the materials that are underway in Germany in terms of prevention, you will find a lots of handbooks, a lots of ideas, a lots of programs. Sometimes in bigger university, you have small departments who are just dealing with violence in the university. And their program and all these approaches are mainly focused on the situation of students. If you have a look at that results here, you may think that those approach or that strong focus to the position of students might not be that helpful. In the next slide, we see the 12-month prevalence of all the members of the university, just to get an idea what kind of harassment we see in the university. And the big thing is the rumors, the insults, the theft, and the threat is becoming then much lower. Fortunately, those serious, very intensive crimes that are intensive for the victims, fortunately in that university, didn't happen so often. So the case numbers, I mean, every victim is one victim too much, but the case numbers are pretty low, and that's why it's not really, it wasn't able, or I wasn't able to examine that in the future slides, because the case numbers were just too low. Here's a comparison to that what Kerner could show in his study, and you can see that the numbers are pretty different. Also, and this is an interesting result for me because we really used the same wording, so it should be comparable. In this study, I tried to bring together the 12-month prevalence of victimization, independency of the status. And as you can see, I bolted the high numbers, and you can see straight away that technology and administrative staff members frequently show higher rates, except when it comes to theft and these online harassment things. There the professors are show a higher risk to be affected. When I come to risk, what I did here is I calculated the relative risk in dependency to your status to be affected by at least one offense that we were talking about. And the good thing, what we can see is everything is statistically significant, which is very nice, and we already see that the risk for people working in the administration is higher, with a factor 4.4 in comparison to all other groups. So it's not into a comparison to one certain group, into comparison to all other groups. What we also see is that the risk that was reported by students is significantly lower. Of course, the interval of confidence among the professors is stretched because we have low case numbers here. And here we see a similar picture. This is the 12-month prevalence, and one could now, I could show you dozens of slides, and they all show more or less the same results. Here we see that relative risk independency of a certain offense, and you'll always find the same picture, that the administrative staff members show higher risks, significantly higher risks. There's just one exception, that's the theft, where the professors report about more offenses. Might be because they have values with them. It's typical for property crime. And yeah, to double check that, binary logistical regressions has been calculated, and this time not all other people were the reference group, but students were the reference group. And you can see that, again, the risk, the factors are much higher if you are from technical administration or research staff. Females become more often the victims of crime than males, and the age did also play an important role here. But we did not only ask what did happen to you, we did also ask what were the consequences of crime. Again, items were offered to those, we had a filter, those people who indicated that at least one offense happened to them within the last 12 months in the context of the university. They were asked what were the consequences. Here you can see the items, and I bolted some items that showed in the later analysis a certain relevance. Here again, we can see that. And everything that is marked red showed statistically significant results. We did an analysis of variance, and we found here significant differences. But as it is in the first stage of the analysis of variance, you don't know what differences you see. So therefore, we had to do the post-hoc tests, and we were going through those tables and looking for statistically significant results. And instead of doing that now together with you here, going through dozens of tables, I brought together what was found. And we can see that the employees of administration are suffering more intensively from the occupation. And so they experience more, and it's stronger for them to live with that. And they report more often about nightmares and even physical reactions about that in comparison, for example, to students. Employees of the administration and research staff searching more often help for students, more often help than students. And professors, and that I think is an interesting thing, professors more often report that they have emerged strengthened from the situation. That is something that we have seen in no other group, but it was statistically significant for professors. So obviously professors inform themselves, they think about that, but then they find a way to deal with that and to come clear with that, and then after that they even report, I've become stronger of that situation. So when it comes to prevention, one should really change a little bit the focus maybe. Here we see another time the results of the survey. Yeah, and as mentioned a couple of times during the presentation, of course students are victims also of crime, especially of the sexual harassment that we have seen in one slide, but the focus of prevention should really also take into account people from the administration and from the technical staff, because they are, in terms of quantity, more affected by that, and they have problems, stronger problems to deal with their victimization than other groups. Okay. So, then, thank you. Any questions?
If I may, I do have a question.
Okay, please.
It was a question for you. It was very interesting to hear. But one thing I wondered is, do victims of hate crimes really know why they became victims? It's a very central thing in your whole research. And I was wondering, is it something they know, or is it something they think of, or maybe they are insecure of, and then they say, that's why I was targeted?
Yeah. They don't know as an objective fact. I mean, these are all subjective things we are asking for. What we are asking, do you have the impression that this was because of your color of skin and the like? So no, they don't know. But I think the most important is their subjective impression. That's also a reality. So, and I think they have a pretty good feeling for this. This is what I read in the literature.
Yeah, if I can add maybe something here, I think so too. I mean, the official statistics depends totally on that what the police officers at the beginning of the investigation believes, and I think that's much more away from the reality than asking the victims. And that leads to a question, if you allow. We have seen that interesting graphics in your presentation indicating that you have the position of the police officers on the one hand, how they was that a hate crime offense or not, and you had the victim's perspective of that. Would you say that one could make that that one could make that better, that by giving, for example, a handbook to the police officers, how to identify hate crime, or how could one make that better?
Certainly. In Germany, there has not been much hassle to develop better measures to capture this phenomenon of hate crime. It's written in the official statistics that you should also take into account victimization because of race. And as you might have seen, there's anti-Semitic crimes, xenophobic, Islam against religion. So they have that in mind, that these categories exist. But my experience is, and I've looked into the data and I talked to police officers, that it's not common to think much about this. When do I categorize something as right-wing? And yeah. So yeah, it would be very good to do trainings. I mean, in the United States, there's a lot of police officer trainings, and we don't have anything like that. So we might have to go with this development also.
If there are no questions, I have another one for you. I was also wondering, you seem to say that the police is the solution, and would it not be very well that they are the ones who are able to do something against the hate crimes? And is it not very important also to make the public aware of their behavior? I mean, standing by and sometimes even joining the perpetrators, that's terrible. I mean, if you confront people, don't you think that if you show them videos of what have happened, don't you think you would be able maybe to change the attitude and the behavior of the public?
Definitely. I mean, what Levin and McDavid say, it's both. It's the reaction of the people who stand by, who are not police, that further disintegration feelings and fear. Plus, it's the role of the police, who are an agent who can better protect the victim, maybe with measures. I mean, they are there to protect victims as well. So it's just two different social agents, I would say, but both are important in their reaction. Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Well, if there are no more questions, I think we can say 3 minutes after before closing the conference. Thank you very much for your attendance and for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.